Thank you. Abraham, I have a question, but I'd like to put it in context. I am struggling with, how do I know what I want to do?
You'll never know while you're struggling.
Okay.
Because in the struggle, you're upstream, and what you know is downstream.
Okay.
So the struggle itself keeps you from ever knowing.
Okay.
So start by telling a different story.
Okay. The context I'm around with this is a year and a half ago, my 34-year-old son was found dead in his home. And we do not know why, and we will probably not ever know why. The journey I've had this year and a half has taken me through incredible grief. And there is something about this that I feel like there's something I'm supposed to do with it. My feeling is our society does not really know how to deal with grief. I didn't know how to deal with grief. I've learned a lot about this and how to be with someone in grief, what I wanted in grief. And I just feel like there's something I'm supposed to do, and yet I don't know what to do with this. I don't know where to go with it.
From our point of view, grief, no matter what the cause, and there can be no more legitimate reason for grief than the one you've spoken here. But just the same, grief, no matter what the reason, is separation from knowing. So in grief, the dominant intent is to move away from the grief and back to the knowing. In other words, they are as close to opposite poles of anything. Knowing is alignment, grief is utter disempowerment. And the thing that makes it hard for physical friends is that they want to sort out all of the reasons for the grief and talk about them. And we only want to talk about grief alignment. And so most people, even though what they really want is for the grief to lift and to come back into alignment, most people want to sort out the details of it. It's pleasing to us to hear you say, we don't know what happened and probably never will know, and we want you to not care about knowing, because you can't poke around in that without maintaining the grief, and the grief is not what you want. Closing the gap is what you want, you see. We talk a lot about this emotional scale and how from grief the logical step is anger, and there is release of pain in the anger. But then the logical step from anger is not back to grief. The logical step from anger is less anger and less anger into frustration and eventually hoping, believing, and knowing. So when you say, my struggle is that I want to know what I know, and I want to know how to get to what I know, that what you're asking for, and your words could not have been better, you're wanting to help people understand alignment. When you decide that you want to feel good, and you begin listening for the way you are feeling and choosing your thoughts based upon how the thought feels, and showing yourself that you can return to the alignment that is natural to you, your grief will lift. And so here are a series of statements that we want to say. The grief that you feel is not about the death of your son. It's about the lack of alignment between you and you. Now, of course, that was the catalyst. And of course, if that hadn't happened, you would not be experiencing this grief. But we want to say, people say, I feel terrible because I miss this person who is no longer physically here with me. And we say, you don't miss the person who's no longer physically here with you. You miss the way you felt when that person was physically here with you. It's the alignment that is missing, not the person. Because the person is not missing. Death doesn't separate you from anyone. But vibration separates you from who you are, and when you're separated from who you are, you're now separated from who your son is, because your son is over there with who you really are. So the reunion is in the closing of the gap. And next we want to say that The details of life often confuse you because, not just you, all of you, because there's so much erroneous, unnecessary conversation about how did it happen, why did it happen, who brought it about, should we do something about it, was there foul play, should somebody else be punished. In other words, there's all that stuff that while it is of interest to the subject, it's not of interest in closing the gap. And closing the gap's all that matters, you see. Very often, powerful teachers come together in co-creative experiences in order to come to great awarenesses. And you are so right in so many things you said. The world is grieving massively, and from our point of view, utterly unnecessarily. You know yourself from many moments of, some moments of, occasional moments of it lifting off of you and your heart singing for a minute. You know that your heart can sing again and consistently, even with all of this having happened. You know that.
Yes, yes, I do.
And every time it does, you feel guilty. Your heart sings for a moment, and then you think, given the circumstances, I've got no business having a happy heart. And that's the story that you want to quell. You want to help people understand what grief really is. And you want to help people understand who they really are. And you want to show them how they have the power to return to their joy while they don't have the power to control what's happening around them. That's what unconditional love is. Conditional love says, my child will be born, my child will be happy, my child will do everything that is good for him, my child will please me in every possible way. I will control these conditions. A very conditional love says the conditions are controlled and they are pleasing to me and therefore I feel good. Unconditional love says I cannot control the conditions, but I align with love anyway, because that's my true nature. And there is only freedom in unconditional love. Conditional love is bondage, 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 bondage. And bondage and grief are identical vibrations. There are people in bondage over the fear of what will happen because they don't think they could live through it. And you're here to tell them you can. Not only can you live through it, not only can you survive it, you can joyously survive it. Because the way you feel isn't dependent upon anybody else, no matter how much you love them. The way you feel is dependent upon your projection of thought in the moment and its relative alignment to who you really are.
The struggle with this action oriented that I've heard before, I feel disconnected from trying to be where I am, closing the gap, and then where is the next step?
Well, that's because you're just getting the cart before the horse, so to speak. In other words, work on the alignment as best you can, and new and next logical steps will begin to appear to you. In other words, when you say, I don't know what to do, and there is confusion because you don't know what to do, it's because you haven't done the aligning thing first. And when you do the aligning thing first, what to do will occur to you, and it will feel right on, you see.
Okay. All right.
We think you're doing remarkably well. Things that seem so wrong and so challenging and so unnecessary and so unforgivable and so awful are the things that cause the greatest parlaying of desire. And when you line up with that kind of desire, oh, do the heavens sing, you see.
Okay. Thank you.
You don't need tragedy for your heart to sing, but your heart doesn't need to stop singing with tragedy.
Right. Thank
Good.
you. Thank you.